Chima was the kind of man people admired from afar. Tall, handsome, kind, charismatic, always immaculately dressed, and quick with a charming smile. The kind of man that made women blush in his presence. On the outside, he looked like a devoted husband to Ezinne and a proud father to their two children. But beneath the surface, Chima had a secret appetite: women. Even before their wedding, Chima had been a serial cheat, but he was clever enough to keep it hidden until the wedding rings were exchanged. Once the vows were exchanged, he became reckless and stopped pretending. Ezinne noticed the change in her husband. The late night business meetings became more frequent, and the faint trace of a woman's perfume that was not hers lingered on his clothes. Money was always tied up in deals, yet somehow there was never enough for her or the children. Chima would rather lavish his wealth on his side chicks than care for his own family. She tried to be patient, convincing herself it was only a phase that would pass. But Chima grew even bolder, no longer hiding his late nights or the lies that came with them. What once crept in as whispers of doubt now stood before her as undeniable truth. She poured out her heart to Chima, begging him to stop neglecting her and their children. But he never listened. Night after night, she stayed awake, waiting, praying desperately for him to change. But it was as though her prayers seemed to fall on deaf ears. Chima became even bolder, staying out late into the midnight hours, sometimes not coming home at all. He ignored her calls and never calling back, as if she and the children didn't exist. Ezinne's heart grew heavy with sorrow. She was tired, miserable, and drowning in frustration, feeling like a stranger in her own marriage. When she finally summoned the courage to confide in his mother, hoping that she would caution him or at least comfort her, the response she received was something she never imagined. Words that cut deeper than Chima's neglect itself. Mama Chima leaned back in her chair, a smile on her lips. Ezinne, there is nothing wrong with a man having other women. It shows he's healthy. And you know, men are polygamous by nature. The words made Ezinne's chest tighten. But Mama Chema wasn't done. If my son is looking outside, maybe you are not doing your job as a wife. Maybe you are nagging him. Men don't like nagging women. Stop nagging him. And also, make yourself more presentable. Her heart sank. She couldn't accept that those words had truly come from his mother's mouth. The sting of those words stayed with her for weeks. Months passed, and Chima's affairs only grew worse. Ezinne felt more and more like a stranger in her own home. One evening, her friend Uju came over and found her weeping. She told Uju her marriage ordeal. Ezinne, Uju said gently, stop wasting your tears on a man who has no respect for you. I've told you again and again, but you won't hear. No man can love you more than you love yourself. No that and no peace. You are a strong woman, determined, and hardworking. You are too young to live in misery. Focus on yourself and your children. You cannot spend your life begging him to care. Her words touched Ezinne deeply. For the first time in a long while, she felt a spark of encouragement, a reminder of the woman she once was. Yet fear still gripped her heart. Fear of the unknown, of raising her children alone, of what people would say. She wanted to act, but courage had not yet taken full root. Chima grew more reckless by the day. The well-being of his wife and children was no longer his concern. Every bit of his time, his money, and his attention was consumed by his latest obsession, Melissa, an Instagram baddie with thousands of followers, a flashy lifestyle, and an insatiable love for expensive gifts. Within weeks, Chima had rented a luxury apartment for her. Soon, he was practically living there with her, while Ezinne and the children were left in the shadows of his neglect. Not long after, their little daughter, Dara, fell terribly ill. At first, Ezinne tried giving her over-the-counter medicine, but the sickness only worsened. Dara's temperature shot dangerously high, and she grew too weak to eat or even move. Panicked, Ezinne dialed Chima's number over and over, but as usual, he didn't pick up. She sent him a message explaining how sick their daughter was. Still, no reply. Desperate, she called her friend Uju. Without hesitation, it was Uju who rushed to her side and provided the money they needed. Together, they got Dara to the hospital, where she was admitted immediately and placed on treatment. For days, Ezinne kept vigil by her daughter's bedside, tears in her eyes, while her husband was in another woman's arms. At last, Dara was discharged, and they returned home with relief and gratitude. That night, after settling her children into bed, Ezinne sat quietly in the dim light of her room, her mind heavy with thoughts. She replayed everything that had happened: the unanswered calls, the silence from Chima, and the way Uju had stepped in like family, offering not only financial help, but also the strength she desperately needed. A cold shiver ran through her as she imagined what would have happened if Uju hadn't been there. The thought alone made her chest tighten. In that moment, Ezinne knew something had to change. She could no longer ignore the truth. For the first time, she resolved to take Uju's advice seriously, to stop waiting for Chema to care, and to start choosing herself and her children. That night, Ezinne made a decision. She was done waiting for Chema. she was done waiting for him to change. With Uju's guidance and support, Ezinne started a small dropshipping venture. At first, the sales came slowly, just a few orders, but she didn't relent. She didn't stop. She was consistent. And with time, her orders began to multiply faster than she had ever expected. For the first time in years, she didn't have to wait for Chema to hand her money. She could buy groceries on her own. She could pay her children's school fees without begging until her lips ached. She felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace, satisfaction, and control. When Chima discovered she was running a business, he completely stopped giving her money. But Ezinne remained unshaken. She had already built her own means, and for the first time, she no longer felt dependent on him. Meanwhile, Melissa had been seeing a guy she met at the gym. At first, she tried to keep him at a distance, hiding where she lived. But eventually, he found out. Unknown to her, he struggled with unpredictable mood swings. One cool evening, he showed up unannounced at her apartment to surprise her. To his shock, he met Melissa in a very comfortable position with Chima. In a fit of anger, he stormed into the room. Before Chima could even explain himself, the young man grabbed him, shoving him and manhandling him with such force that Chima was left shaking and humiliated. Melissa screamed, but she couldn't do anything. The beating came swift and merciless. By the time he was done, Chima could barely stand. Chima slowly opened his eyes and found himself lying on a hospital bed. His body ached and was heavy with pain. At his side sat his mother, her face a mix of anger and disappointment. Weakly, he asked, "Where is my wife, Ezinne? Where are the children?" His mother looked at him long and hard before speaking. "We called her severally, but she never answered. We went to your house, but it was empty. Ezinne has moved out with your children, and we don't know where they are." The words struck Chima harder than his injuries. He stared at the ceiling, stunned. Meanwhile, when Ezinne was told Chima was in the hospital and was asking for her, her reply was calm but firm. "I'm not coming. Call his mother." Just then, a nurse walked in with an envelope. "It was delivered for you, sir," she said softly, placing it on the table. With trembling hands, Chima tore it open. Inside were divorce papers. His eyes scanned the words, but they blurred with tears. In that moment, the weight of his neglect, his cheating, his betrayal, and his arrogance crashed down on him. He had always believed Ezinne loved him too much to ever leave, that no matter what he did, she would endure. But then, the truth stood before him in black and white. She was gone. Chima buried his face in his hands, guilt consuming him. He blamed himself for everything, but it was already too late. In the end, Ezinne's business blossomed. Her children thrived, and her heart was at peace. She remained especially grateful to Uju, the friend who made it all possible and stood by her through it all. Lessons to be learnt from these stories. Self-love is the foundation of happiness. No one can love you more than you love yourself. Cheating and neglect destroy families. Infidelity robs trust, peace, and stability. And finally, supportive friends are priceless. A true friend like Uju can be the pillar you need to rise again. Appreciate your friends and also be there for them when they need you most.